A billionaire vanished from a mansion protected around the clock. The cameras were running. Security guards were on duty. The gates never opened. Yet William Hawthorne disappeared as if he had never existed. 25 police officers. The FBI. Search teams. No one could find him. Then a 10-year-old girl quietly said, "I think everyone is looking in the wrong place." The Hawthorne estate rose above the cliffs outside Seattle like a palace of glass and stone, its towering windows reflecting the gray waters of Puget Sound. Security cameras watched every entrance. Guards patrolled every corridor. The gates remained locked throughout the night. Yet by sunrise, William Hawthorne was gone. His bed was untouched. His phone was missing. His private vehicle remained parked in the garage. Within hours, flashing police lights painted the long driveway blue and red. Detectives moved through the mansion carrying tablets, cameras, and evidence kits. They searched every room, every storage area, every guest suite. They reviewed security footage frame by frame. They questioned staff members, business partners, and family members. The answer never came. It was as if the 68-year-old billionaire had simply dissolved into thin air. News helicopters circled overhead. Television anchors interrupted regular programming. Social media exploded with theories. Some believed he had staged his own disappearance. Others feared he had suffered a medical emergency while alone somewhere beyond the estate grounds. The longer the search continued, the stranger the mystery became. Detective Marcus Reed stood in the grand foyer beneath a crystal chandelier that sparkled like frozen rain. He had spent 20 years solving difficult cases. Yet this one refused to make sense. Every clue led nowhere. Every possibility collapsed under scrutiny. After 3 days of searching, even the most experienced officers were running out of ideas. Among the dozens of people moving through the mansion was a 10-year-old girl named Emma Carter. Her mother, Rachel, worked as a housekeeper for the Hawthorne family. Emma had been forced to spend the week at the estate because her school was closed for maintenance. She stayed quiet. She stayed out of the way. That was what her mother always asked her to do. Invisible people caused fewer problems. Invisible people kept their jobs. But Emma noticed things. She always had. While officers stared at screens and reports, she watched faces. While experts analyzed data, she studied rooms. Her grandfather had once told her that the biggest secrets often hid in plain sight because everyone assumed they were too obvious to matter. On the fourth afternoon, Emma stood near a hallway leading toward the east wing. Detectives hurried past her without a glance. Staff members whispered nervously. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Emma looked toward the far wall. Something bothered her. Something she could not explain. She stared for several seconds before finally speaking. "I think everyone is looking in the wrong place." Nobody paid attention. A little girl could not possibly know more than 25 trained officers. Yet Emma continued staring at that wall as if it were trying to tell her something. Sometimes power cannot solve a mystery that patience can. Sometimes the smallest observer sees what the busiest minds overlook. And what Emma noticed next would force the entire investigation in a direction nobody expected. The night William Hawthorne disappeared was far stranger than anyone realized. William Hawthorne was a man accustomed to attention, but on the evening before he vanished, even he seemed distracted. The annual Hawthorne Foundation Gala filled the mansion with politicians, executives, and celebrities. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Servers carried silver trays through rooms scented with polished wood and expensive perfume. Music drifted beneath glittering chandeliers while guests discussed investments, charities, and future deals. From a distance, it looked like another perfect night in the life of one of America's most successful businessmen. Yet beneath the elegance, something felt different. William moved through the ballroom with a thoughtful expression. He smiled for photographs and greeted donors, but his eyes repeatedly drifted toward the entrance hall as though he were waiting for someone. Emma noticed because she had spent most of the evening sitting quietly beside her mother near the service corridor. Children were rarely invited into the world of billionaires. Invisible children even less so. Still, Emma watched everything. Around 8 o'clock, she saw William step away from a conversation and answer a phone call. His expression changed instantly. The warmth disappeared from his face. He listened for nearly a minute without speaking. Then he walked toward a private study overlooking the ocean. Nobody followed him. At least, nobody seemed to. Later, Emma noticed another unusual moment. Daniel Hawthorne, William's nephew and presumed heir, appeared unusually nervous. He checked his watch repeatedly. He scanned the room. Once, he nearly collided with a server because he was looking over his shoulder instead of ahead. The behavior lasted only seconds, but it lingered in Emma's memory. Most adults forgot small moments. Emma collected them. Shortly before midnight, guests began leaving. The mansion slowly quieted. Staff members cleaned tables. Security completed routine checks. William Hawthorne was reportedly seen heading toward his private wing. By morning, he was gone. Detectives believed the answer lay somewhere inside the thousands of details gathered from that evening. What they did not know was that one tiny moment from the gala had already lodged itself inside Emma's memory. And soon, that forgotten detail would become impossible to ignore. The detail that stayed in Emma's mind was not the phone call, not the nervous guests, and not even Daniel Hawthorne's strange behavior. It was something far smaller, something almost invisible. The next morning after the gala, while her mother cleaned the East Wing, Emma had wandered past a long hallway lined with expensive paintings and family portraits. She remembered stopping there because one painting caught her attention. It showed William Hawthorne standing beside his grandfather in front of the company's very first office building. Emma had studied it for nearly a minute because she liked old photographs and stories. That was why she knew exactly how it looked. For days later, standing in the same hallway as detectives rushed past, she noticed something that made her stomach tighten. The painting was crooked. Not by much. Maybe 2 inches. Most people would never notice. But Emma did. She stared at it again. The frame was heavy, expensive, and mounted securely to the wall. It should not have shifted on its own. She glanced around. No one seemed concerned. Detectives were focused on reports and security footage. Technicians were carrying equipment through nearby rooms. The search operation had become a machine, and machines rarely stopped for tiny details. Emma continued watching. Something felt wrong. She tried to ignore it. After all, she was only a child. What could she possibly know that trained investigators did not? Yet her grandfather's voice echoed inside her memory. The smallest clue often looks unimportant until it changes everything. Meanwhile, the investigation was growing more complicated. New reporters crowded outside the estate gates every day. Financial analysts debated what would happen to Hawthorne Industries if William never returned. Shareholders demanded answers. Family members appeared on television expressing concern. Behind closed doors, executives held emergency meetings. Billions of dollars suddenly depended on finding one missing man. Detective Marcus Reed felt the pressure from every direction. During a strategy meeting that afternoon, he stood before a digital map displayed across a massive conference room screen. Search zones covered hundreds of square miles. Forests had been checked. Marinas had been checked. Airports had been checked. Hospitals had been checked. Nothing. One detective suggested that William had planned his disappearance months in advance. Another believed someone inside the estate knew more than they admitted. Reed listened carefully, but none of the theories felt complete. Every explanation left important questions unanswered. Across the room, Daniel Hawthorne sat quietly with several attorneys. His expression appeared calm, but Emma noticed something strange when she passed the open doorway. Daniel was not worried. Everyone else looked exhausted, frightened, or frustrated. Daniel looked impatient, as though he wanted the investigation to move faster towards some destination only he understood. Emma could not explain why that bothered her. She only knew that it did. Later that evening, rain clouds rolled across the sky, covering the estate in darkness. The mansion seemed quieter than ever. Emma found herself standing once more near the hallway with the painting. This time she noticed something new. There were faint marks on the hardwood floor beneath the frame. Tiny scratches. Fresh scratches. As though something heavy had recently moved. Emma's heartbeat quickened. She slowly looked from the floor to the painting and back again. Then she realized something that no one else had seen. The scratches did not stop at the wall. They disappeared directly behind the frame. And at that moment, Emma understood that the painting itself might not be the clue. It might be hiding the real one. The moment Emma realized the scratches disappeared behind the painting, a cold sensation moved through her chest. She knew she should walk away. She knew detectives, security specialists, and federal investigators were already handling the case. Yet the more she stared at the massive portrait, the harder it became to ignore. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows while distant thunder rolled across the estate grounds. The hallway lights reflected across polished hardwood floors and gold-trimmed frames, stretching long shadows through the empty corridor. Emma stepped closer. The portrait towered nearly 7 feet high, its carved walnut frame displaying William Hawthorne standing beside his grandfather during the company's earliest days. Most people would have seen a family heirloom. Emma saw a question. The faint scratches on the floor remained visible beneath the frame. They weren't random. 2 narrow lines ran perfectly parallel, disappearing beneath the lower edge of the portrait. Something heavy had moved. Something recently. Her grandfather had always told her that objects left footprints just like people did. You only had to learn how to read them. Emma glanced around. The hallway was empty. Most investigators remained focused on the West Wing, reviewing security footage and interviewing staff. News helicopters still circled beyond the estate grounds, and reporters continued broadcasting updates from outside the gates. No one seemed interested in a painting. Slowly, Emma stepped closer. She wasn't trying to move it. She simply wanted a better look. As her fingers lightly brushed the edge of the frame, she felt something unexpected. Not movement. Space. Her eyes widened. The portrait wasn't resting directly against the wall. A narrow gap existed behind it. Only a fraction of an inch. Barely noticeable. Yet once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. Emma immediately stepped back. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous. Deliberate. As though the painting had been positioned there for a reason. Before she could investigate further, voices echoed from the far end of the hallway. 2 estate employees appeared carrying storage boxes. Emma quickly moved away and pretended to study another portrait. The workers passed without noticing her. Still, the interruption was enough. She returned to her room that evening, but sleep refused to come. Images replayed endlessly inside her mind. The crooked frame, the scratches, Daniel Hawthorne's strange impatience, the mysterious phone call during the gala, the gap behind the portrait. Individually, none of the details meant much. Together, they felt connected. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with renewed activity. Luxury vehicles filled the circular driveway. Board members arrived one after another. Attorneys occupied conference rooms. Financial analysts discussed the future of Hawthorne Industries on every major news network. Pressure was mounting from every direction. Yet while powerful adults debated billion-dollar consequences, Emma found herself thinking about a painting. Later that afternoon, she returned to the hallway. This time she examined the frame more carefully. Near the bottom corner, partially hidden beneath decorative woodwork, she noticed a tiny metallic reflection. It was almost invisible. A small piece of brushed steel. Most people would never have seen it. Emma crouched lower. Her pulse quickened. The metal wasn't part of the frame. It belonged to something behind it. Carefully, she pressed against the area. Nothing happened. Then she tried again. A faint click echoed from inside the wall. Emma froze. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then she heard something else. A soft mechanical sound. Almost like an internal lock disengaging. Slowly, the portrait shifted outward. Not much. Just enough. Emma stared in disbelief. Hidden behind the painting was not a simple compartment. What she discovered was a reinforced architectural panel built into the mansion decades earlier during its original construction. From the outside, it appeared identical to the surrounding wall. There were no hinges, seams, handles, or visible access points. Estate blueprints would later reveal that the structure had originally been designed as a secure emergency archive known only to a handful of trusted family members. Even advanced scans would likely have identified it as part of the building itself. William Hawthorne had not hidden something behind a painting. He had hidden it inside the mansion. Emma's heart pounded as the concealed panel opened just enough to reveal darkness beyond. Something was inside. Something William had wanted hidden from everyone. And in that moment, standing alone in a silent hallway while the entire country searched for answers elsewhere, Emma realized she might have just uncovered the first real clue to William Hawthorne's disappearance. The scratches behind the painting led Emma to a discovery she could not stop thinking about. Long after the rain began tapping against the mansion windows, she remained in the hallway staring at the massive portrait. The estate around her seemed alive with tension. Detectives hurried through marble corridors. Security personnel exchanged updates through radios. Reporters crowded outside the gates. Yet somehow, nobody appeared interested in the painting. Emma glanced around one final time before carefully reaching toward the frame. To her surprise, it shifted more easily than she expected. Hidden behind the portrait was a narrow compartment built directly into the wall. Her heart pounded. Inside rested a small metal box coated with dust. It looked old, as though it had been waiting there for years. Emma hesitated. Every instinct told her this was important. Slowly, she opened the box. Inside was a flash drive and a sealed envelope. The envelope carried only 3 handwritten words. If necessary only. Emma stared at the message. The handwriting looked deliberate and familiar. She had seen William Hawthorne's signature often enough around the estate to recognize it immediately. Before she could examine the contents further, footsteps echoed from the opposite end of the hallway. She quickly returned everything to the compartment and slid the painting back into place. Moments later, 2 investigators passed without noticing anything unusual. Emma remained calm, but inside, questions were multiplying. Why would William hide something behind a family portrait? Why had nobody discovered it before? And most importantly, had William intended someone to find it? The following morning, while helping her mother organize supplies in a storage room near the service wing, Emma quietly opened the envelope. Inside was a brief note. The message was simple. Trust evidence, not assumptions. Those 4 words stayed with her throughout the day. Meanwhile, pressure continued building across Hawthorne Industries. Financial news networks discussed uncertainty surrounding the company. Shareholders demanded answers. Emergency meetings filled conference rooms decorated with polished wood and crystal lighting. Everywhere Emma looked, powerful adults were searching for explanations. Yet none of them knew about the hidden compartment. Late that afternoon, Emma finally found an opportunity to examine the flash drive using an unused office computer. The drive contained dozens of archived folders. Most appeared to be business records. She could not understand much of the information. The documents contained legal language, financial terminology, and corporate procedures far beyond her experience. Still, one detail caught her attention. The same name appeared repeatedly throughout different folders. Thomas Whitaker. Emma had never heard of him before. The files offered little explanation. Yet William seemed to reference him again and again. Whoever Thomas Whitaker was, William clearly trusted him. Emma quietly memorized the name. At the time, she had no idea why it mattered. Then she noticed a video file buried deep within the archive. Unlike the documents, it carried a simple title. For whoever finds this. Emma moved the cursor toward the file, and as the screen began loading, she realized she was about to hear directly from the man everyone in America was desperately trying to find. The moment the video file appeared on the screen, Emma felt as though the entire mansion had suddenly gone quiet around her. Outside the small office window, dark clouds drifted across the afternoon sky. Somewhere beyond the estate gates, reporters continued broadcasting updates to millions of viewers. Inside the mansion, attorneys held emergency meetings, executives argued over contingency plans, and investigators searched desperately for answers. Yet none of them knew what Emma was about to see. She clicked the file. For a moment, the screen flickered. Then William Hawthorne appeared. He sat behind a wooden desk in a private office Emma did not recognize. Unlike the confident billionaire seen in magazines and company advertisements, William looked older, more thoughtful, more cautious. He stared directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," he began quietly, "then events have unfolded exactly as I feared they might." Emma leaned closer. For the first time since finding the hidden panel, she was hearing William's voice directly. Not through reporters, not through rumors, not through investigators. Through him. William folded his hands on the desk. For months, someone inside Hawthorne Industries has been manipulating information. His expression remained calm. Reports have changed. Records have disappeared. Decisions have been influenced behind closed doors. Emma listened carefully. Most of the business documents stored on the flash drive had made little sense to her. They were filled with financial terminology and legal language far beyond anything a 10-year-old could fully understand. But this was different. William spoke plainly, clearly, as though he knew exactly who might someday watch the recording. "The danger isn't what people can see," he continued. "The danger is what they never think to question." Outside the office, distant footsteps echoed through the hallway. Emma barely noticed. Every word felt important. William paused briefly before continuing. "The greatest threat is rarely the person everyone suspects. Emma immediately thought about Daniel Hawthorne. For days, reporters had focused on him. Detectives questioned him repeatedly. Television analysts discussed him every night. Everyone seemed convinced Daniel was hiding something. Yet William's warning suggested something entirely different. Then William mentioned a name. Thomas Whitaker. Emma immediately recognized it. The same name appeared repeatedly throughout the files stored on the flash drive. William's expression softened. If something happens to me, Thomas will know what to do. Emma frowned. Why had nobody involved in the investigation mentioned him? Why wasn't anyone looking for him? The questions multiplied. William continued speaking. He explained that he had quietly gathered evidence pointing toward a highly trusted individual inside the company. Not someone attracting public attention. Not someone appearing in headlines. Someone who had spent years earning trust. Someone hidden in plain sight. Emma felt her stomach tighten. The more she listened, the more she realized how little anyone truly understood about what had been happening inside Hawthorne Industries. Then William leaned slightly closer to the camera. For the first time, genuine concern appeared in his eyes. If you're seeing this, someone may already know these files have been opened. Emma's breath caught. William's voice lowered. Trust evidence. Trust patterns. He paused. But trust no one simply because everyone else does. The room suddenly felt colder. The warning sounded less like advice and more like preparation, as though William had expected something dangerous to happen long before he disappeared. He glanced briefly toward something off camera. Then he looked back. Do not follow the loudest voices. Another pause. Follow the facts. The video ended. The screen faded to black. Emma sat motionless. Questions raced through her mind. Who was the trusted executive William suspected? Why had Thomas Whitaker been mentioned so many times? And if William had prepared this recording months in advance, what exactly had he been expecting? Then a small notification suddenly appeared in the corner of the monitor. Unauthorized access attempt detected. Emma stared at the message. A second line appeared. External request blocked. Her pulse quickened. Someone else knew the files existed. Someone had tried to access them only moments after the video finished playing. Slowly, Emma looked toward the office door. For the first time since William Hawthorne disappeared, she realized she might not be the only person searching for the truth. And whoever was on the other side of that search had just learned she existed. The unauthorized access alert remained in Emma's mind long after she shut down the computer. Someone had tried to reach the files. Someone had known they existed. And somehow, they had reacted within minutes of her opening them. For the first time since discovering the hidden archive, the mystery felt real. Not like a story. Not like an investigation unfolding on television. Real. Emma carefully removed the flash drive and slipped it into the pocket of her backpack before leaving the office. The hallway outside was empty. Still, she found herself glancing over her shoulder. The mansion suddenly felt different. Less like a home. More like a place filled with secrets. The following morning, Hawthorne Estate awoke beneath another gray Seattle sky. Luxury vehicles rolled through the front gates. Attorneys arrived carrying briefcases. Financial consultants moved between conference rooms. Television crews remained stationed outside the property. With every passing hour, pressure on Hawthorne Industries continued to grow. If William Hawthorne remained missing much longer, temporary control over portions of the company could soon become permanent. Everybody seemed focused on the upcoming board vote. Everybody except Emma. While powerful adults debated billion-dollar decisions, she found herself thinking about names, patterns, connections, and one question she couldn't ignore. If William had hidden evidence, who had he been trying to expose? That afternoon, Emma returned to the unused office. This time she skipped the video. Instead, she opened the folders stored on the flash drive. Most of the documents were difficult to understand. Financial statements, internal audits, approval records, corporate reports, page after page of information that seemed meaningless at first glance. But Emma wasn't searching for numbers. She was searching for repetition. And gradually, she began noticing it. Certain names appeared more often than others. Certain signatures surfaced across multiple departments. Certain approvals seemed connected to decisions that benefited the same individuals. At first, the pattern felt random. Then it didn't. Emma grabbed a notepad from a nearby desk. She started writing names, drawing arrows, marking connections. Hours passed. Outside the office window, daylight slowly faded. Inside, a picture began taking shape. The same executive appeared again and again, not at the center of every decision, just close enough to influence them, close enough to recommend, close enough to approve, close enough to redirect attention elsewhere. Emma stared at the page. For days, the entire country had focused on Daniel Hawthorne. News channels discussed him constantly. Investigators questioned him repeatedly. Reporters followed him everywhere. Yet Daniel's name appeared surprisingly little inside William's files. The realization made Emma sit back in her chair. Everyone had been watching the obvious suspect. Meanwhile, someone else had remained almost completely invisible, just as William had warned. The danger wasn't what people could see. The danger was what they never thought to question. A chill ran through Emma. She reviewed the documents one final time. The pattern remained consistent, quiet, difficult to notice unless someone was specifically looking for it. And now she understood something important. William had never left a direct accusation. He had left a trail built from evidence instead of assumptions, a trail someone patient enough could follow. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the hallway outside. Emma quickly minimized the files. Footsteps passed the office door, then disappeared. Only after several seconds did she relax. She looked back at the notepad, at the names, at the connections, at the growing picture hidden beneath hundreds of ordinary documents. For the first time, she felt certain about one thing. William Hawthorne's disappearance wasn't the real mystery. The real mystery was why someone had worked so hard to make everyone look in the wrong direction. And whoever that person was, they were far closer to the center of Hawthorne Industries than anyone realized. The realization stayed with Emma throughout the night. Someone inside Hawthorne Industries had spent months directing attention away from themselves. Not by lying, not by breaking obvious rules, but by quietly influencing what everyone else chose to see. The next morning, the estate felt more tense than ever. Luxury vehicles filled the circular driveway from sunrise onward. Board members arrived one after another. Attorneys occupied nearly every conference room. Television crews continued broadcasting from outside the gates. And everywhere Emma looked, people seemed to be preparing for something. The emergency board vote was less than 24 hours away. If William Hawthorne remained missing, major portions of the company's leadership structure could permanently change. Millions of dollars were at stake, perhaps billions. Yet despite all the activity surrounding her, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the documents. The names, the connections, the warning William had left behind. By afternoon, she reached a decision. She couldn't carry the secret alone anymore. She needed someone she could trust. And among everyone inside the mansion, only one person seemed interested in evidence more than assumptions. Detective Marcus Reed. Emma found him inside a temporary operations room near the West Wing. Maps covered the walls. Laptop screens displayed timelines, security footage, and search reports. Half-empty coffee cups sat scattered across desks. The room looked less like a command center and more like a battlefield that had been losing for days. Reed was reviewing documents when Emma appeared in the doorway. He looked up. Unlike most adults, he didn't seem surprised to see her. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Reed closed the file in front of him. "You're the one who kept watching that hallway," he said. Emma blinked. "You noticed?" A faint smile crossed Reed's face. "For days." He leaned back slightly. "While everyone else was looking at reports, you were looking at people." The detective studied her expression, not with suspicion, with curiosity. And for the first time since the investigation began, Reed felt he might finally be speaking to someone who had noticed what everyone else had overlooked. Emma hesitated. Then she told him everything. The crooked painting, the hidden architectural panel, the flash drive, William's message, the patterns hidden inside the files. As she spoke, Reed's expression gradually changed. At first he seemed skeptical, then thoughtful, then concerned. Before either of them could continue, the operations room door suddenly opened. A senior company attorney stepped inside, carrying a thick stack of legal documents. He stopped when he noticed Emma standing beside Detective Reed. For a moment, confusion crossed his face. Then he laughed softly. "Marcus, are we really taking investigative advice from a 10-year-old? Several staff members glanced up from their laptops. A few exchanged uncomfortable smiles. The attorney shook his head. "We have federal agents, cybersecurity analysts, financial auditors, and half the state's law enforcement resources working this case." His eyes moved toward Emma. "No offense, sweetheart, but this isn't a school science project. A few people chuckled awkwardly. Emma felt her face grow warm. For a brief moment, she wished she had never entered the room. The attorney continued. Children see mysteries everywhere. He shrugged. That's what children do. The room became quiet. Nobody seemed willing to challenge him. Emma looked down at the notebook she had been carrying. For years, she had been invisible. Adults talked around her. Adults ignored her. Adults assumed she had nothing useful to contribute. Maybe this was no different. Then she remembered William's message. Trust evidence, not assumptions. Slowly, Emma walked toward the conference table. She placed her notebook in front of Reed. The attorney watched with obvious amusement. What exactly is that supposed to prove? Emma opened the notebook. Pages filled with names, dates, approvals, connections, arrows linking decisions made months apart. She pointed to one section. Then maybe someone should explain why this executive's authorizations appear 23 times across 6 separate departments. The room instantly became silent. The attorney frowned. Reed turned toward his laptop. He opened several restricted investigative files. One by one, he compared them against Emma's notes. The silence stretched. Then Reed's expression changed. The names matched. The dates matched. The approvals matched. Every single time. Several analysts moved closer to the screen. The attorney's smile disappeared. Nobody laughed anymore. Reed slowly looked up at Emma. How long did it take you to find this? Emma shrugged. A few hours. The room remained silent. Not because they doubted her. Because they suddenly didn't. Reed turned back toward the screen. What appeared there surprised even him. The same executive Emma had identified appeared repeatedly across multiple internal authorizations issued during the months before William's disappearance. None of the actions were illegal. None of them were dramatic. Yet together they created a pattern. A pattern investigators had overlooked because each individual decision seemed insignificant on its own. Reed stared at the screen, then back at Emma. For the first time in days, he felt as though the investigation had finally moved forward. But Emma wasn't finished. There was something else, she said quietly. Reed listened. She explained the warning that appeared after she opened the files. The unauthorized access attempt. The blocked connection. The possibility that someone had immediately noticed the archive had been accessed. Reed's eyes narrowed. Without hesitation, he called the company's cybersecurity team. Hours later, the results arrived. The access request had originated from an executive-level account inside Hawthorne Industries. The exact user could not yet be confirmed. But the implication was impossible to ignore. Someone inside the company had been monitoring those files. Someone knew they existed. And someone had become nervous the moment Emma found them. The room grew quiet again. Neither Emma nor Reed needed to say what both were thinking. William's fears had been real. Very real. Before Reed could speak, a sudden announcement echoed through the mansion's intercom system. Attention all board members and executive staff. Please proceed immediately to the main ballroom. The message repeated twice. Outside the operations room, movement instantly accelerated. Attorneys gathered documents. Executives hurried through corridors. Security personnel rushed toward designated positions. Something important was happening. Reed stood. So much for a quiet afternoon. Minutes later, the mansion's grand ballroom began filling with board members, legal advisors, senior executives, and company representatives. Crystal chandeliers illuminated hundreds of anxious faces. Conversations filled the room. Speculation spread from group to group. Nobody seemed certain why the emergency meeting had been called. Yet everyone sensed the same thing. Something was about to change. Emma entered with her mother and quietly took a place near the back of the room. As people continued arriving, her eyes scanned the crowd. Then she saw the executive whose name had appeared throughout William's files. The person stood near the front of the ballroom. Calm, confident, almost comfortable, as though the outcome had already been decided. The sight sent a chill through Emma, because for the first time, she understood exactly what William had meant. The most dangerous people rarely looked dangerous. Then the massive ballroom doors opened. Every conversation stopped instantly. Dozens of heads turned toward the entrance. Someone had just arrived. Someone nobody expected to see. And the moment Emma recognized the face, she realized everything was about to change. The ballroom remained silent after the doors opened. Every eye turned toward the entrance. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then a tall man in his 60s stepped into the room. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Most people didn't recognize him. Emma did. She had seen his name dozens of times inside William Hawthorne's files. Thomas Whitaker. The same man William had mentioned in his recorded message. The same man nobody seemed interested in discussing. Until now. Thomas walked calmly toward the front of the ballroom. Unlike the executives surrounding him, he showed no sign of nervousness. No sign of urgency. Only quiet determination. Board members exchanged puzzled glances. Several attorneys immediately began whispering among themselves. The executive Emma had identified from the files remained seated near the front. For the first time all afternoon, however, his confidence appeared slightly shaken. Detective Reed stepped beside Thomas. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reed announced, "Mr. Whitaker has requested an opportunity to address the board." The room grew still. Thomas nodded. Then he placed a thick folder onto the conference table. The sound echoed through the ballroom. "I worked alongside William Hawthorne for nearly 20 years, he began. His voice was steady. "Several months ago, William became concerned about irregular activities inside the company." A murmur spread across the room. Thomas continued. "He did not make accusations. He collected evidence." The ballroom fell silent again. One by one, Thomas removed documents from the folder. Internal communications, approval records, financial summaries, executive authorizations. At first glance, each document appeared ordinary. Individually, none seemed alarming. Together, however, they revealed something far more troubling. A pattern. The same pattern Emma had discovered. Certain approvals repeatedly benefited the same individual. Certain investigations had been redirected. Certain recommendations consistently protected the same executive from scrutiny. Detective Reed projected the evidence onto large screens positioned around the ballroom. Faces throughout the room gradually changed. Confusion became concern. Concern became realization. The executive sitting near the front shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Thomas never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. For months, Thomas said, attention was deliberately directed toward the wrong people. Several board members slowly turned toward Daniel Hawthorne. Thomas immediately shook his head. Not him. The room froze. For days, Daniel had been the center of speculation, the center of rumors, the center of suspicion. Yet the evidence showed something entirely different. Daniel had never been the threat. He had been the distraction. The revelation struck the room like a wave. The executive near the front suddenly stood. "This is ridiculous." His voice sounded sharper than before. "You're presenting assumptions." "No," Reed replied calmly. "We're presenting records." The executive glanced toward the exits. Several security officers immediately shifted position. The movement didn't go unnoticed. Neither did the nervousness appearing on his face. Moments later, Reed introduced one final piece of evidence. The cybersecurity report. The same report generated after Emma opened William's hidden files. The same unauthorized access attempt. The same executive-level account. A heavy silence settled across the ballroom. Nobody needed an explanation anymore. The pieces fit together. The hidden archive. William's warning. The manipulated approvals. The access attempt. The pattern Emma had uncovered. For the first time since William Hawthorne disappeared, the truth stood fully exposed. The executive slowly lowered himself back into his chair. His expression had changed completely. The confidence was gone. The room watched in silence as security officers approached his position. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended him. Nobody looked surprised anymore. Then something unexpected happened. A security officer hurried through one of the side entrances and moved directly toward Detective Reed. He whispered something into Reed's ear. Only a few words. Yet Reed's eyes widened instantly. Thomas noticed. So did Emma. The entire room seemed to sense that something had changed. Reed looked toward the ballroom doors. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then a slow smile appeared on his face. The first genuine smile anyone had seen from him since the investigation began. Emma's heart began racing. Because suddenly, she knew. The mystery wasn't over. Not yet. In fact, the most important answer was about to walk through those doors. And when it did, every assumption in the room would change forever. The message whispered to Detective Reed contained only a few words. Yet those words changed everything. William Hawthorne had been found. For a moment, nobody in the ballroom moved. Board members froze. Attorneys lowered their documents. Executives exchanged stunned glances. Even the reporters gathered outside seemed unable to believe what they had just heard. Detective Reed stepped forward and raised a hand for silence. Then he delivered the news. William Hawthorne was alive. Safe. According to security officials, he had been staying at a private retreat owned by a longtime family friend while quietly monitoring developments from a distance. Gasps swept through the room. Some people looked relieved. Others looked confused. A few suddenly appeared very nervous. Less than an hour later, the ballroom doors opened once again. This time, nobody wondered who was arriving. They already knew. William Hawthorne walked into the room. The billionaire looked tired. Older than he had appeared in the video. But healthy. Very healthy. The moment he entered, the atmosphere changed. Conversations disappeared. Questions disappeared. Excuses disappeared. Everyone's attention shifted toward him. William greeted the board politely before thanking Thomas Whitaker for his courage and Detective Reed for refusing to abandon the investigation. Then he turned toward the crowd. For several moments, he simply stood there. Quiet. Thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. I owe all of you an explanation. The ballroom fell silent. William slowly folded his hands. For nearly a year, I suspected someone inside this company was manipulating critical information. Several board members exchanged glances. I saw reports change. I saw investigations quietly disappear. I saw decisions being influenced in ways that made no sense. He paused. But suspicion isn't evidence. The room remained silent. I could have made accusations. I could have called a press conference. I could have pointed fingers. His eyes moved. Across the ballroom. But if I had been wrong, I would have destroyed innocent lives. Several board members slowly nodded. William continued. So I chose another path. He explained that every time he launched an internal review, confidential information somehow leaked. Every investigation stalled. Every warning disappeared. Someone inside the company always seemed one step ahead. I realized that as long as I remained visible, certain people would continue hiding their intentions. The room listened carefully. I needed to know what would happen when they believed I was no longer watching. A heavy silence settled over the ballroom. My disappearance was never intended to create panic. It was intended to expose behavior that only appeared when people thought there would be no consequences. His gaze shifted toward the executive who now sat silently, surrounded by security personnel. And unfortunately, it worked. No one spoke. Because everyone now understood. William had not disappeared to escape. He had disappeared to reveal the truth. Moments later, independent auditors confirmed the evidence presented by Thomas Whitaker. The executive identified in the records was immediately removed from all leadership responsibilities pending a full investigation. Daniel Hawthorne was officially cleared of any wrongdoing. His nervous behavior had never come from greed. It had come from fear. Fear of losing both his uncle and the company his family had spent generations building. For the first time in days, the tension inside the ballroom finally began to fade. Then William's eyes moved across the room, until they found Emma, the 10-year-old girl standing quietly beside her mother. The same way she had stood quietly throughout the investigation. The same way she had stood quietly through most of her life. William slowly walked toward her. The ballroom became completely silent. Do you know what surprises me most? He asked gently. Emma shook her head. A small smile appeared on William's face. I built a company worth billions of dollars. A few people laughed softly. I hired attorneys, investigators, consultants, and some of the smartest professionals in the country. The smile faded. Yet the person who finally saw the truth was a 10-year-old girl most people in this room barely noticed. Silence filled the ballroom. Several people remembered the attorney who had dismissed Emma earlier that day. None of them seemed eager to meet her eyes now. William continued. Most people only look where they're told to look. His voice remained calm. But you looked where nobody else bothered to look. Emma felt her throat tighten. For years, important people had walked past her without noticing she was there. Adults spoke around her. Not to her. People remembered her mother. Rarely her. She had grown used to being invisible. Yet standing there, with every eye in the room focused on her, something felt different. For the first time, someone important wasn't overlooking her. William smiled warmly. Never let anyone convince you that your voice is too small to matter. Emma felt tears gathering in her eyes. Beside her, Rachel quietly wiped away her own. The room remained silent. Not because people didn't know what to say, because they understood exactly what William meant. The investigation had never been solved by power, or status, or wealth. It had been solved by someone willing to pay attention when everyone else stopped looking. Months later, Hawthorne Industries had stabilized. Investors regained confidence. Employees regained trust. Life slowly returned to normal. One bright afternoon, Emma received an invitation from William himself. When she arrived, she discovered dozens of families gathered outside a newly completed community learning center funded by the Hawthorne Foundation. Children played in the courtyard. Parents toured classrooms. Teachers welcomed students. Above the entrance stood a bronze plaque. Emma stared at it, then looked toward William. He smiled. "The first scholarship belongs to you." For a moment, she couldn't speak. The scholarship had been created for children from working families who demonstrated curiosity, integrity, and determination. The very qualities that had led Emma to the truth. The crowd applauded. Photographers captured the moment. But William wasn't finished. "There is one more thing." Emma looked up. William reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and carefully unfolded an old photograph. The edges had faded with time. He handed it to Emma. She looked down, then froze. A young man stood beside William at a construction site decades earlier. Emma's eyes widened. The face was unmistakable. It was her grandfather. The same grandfather who had taught her to notice details. The same grandfather whose advice had guided her throughout the investigation. The same grandfather she still missed every day. The crowd fell silent. William smiled gently. "Do you recognize him?" Emma nodded, unable to speak. William looked at the photograph. 40 years ago, I was a young entrepreneur trying to keep my first company alive." His voice softened. "One evening, your grandfather noticed a bookkeeping error that everyone else missed." Emma listened through tears. The mistake would have destroyed the company. William smiled. "He caught it before anyone else." The billionaire paused. "He saved my future." Emma felt tears roll down her cheeks. Then William looked directly at her. And decades later, his voice nearly broke. His granddaughter saved it again. A quiet gasp moved through the crowd. Rachel covered her mouth. Emma stared at the photograph in disbelief. William gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I spent years trying to find a way to thank his family." His eyes glistened. "I never imagined life would give me the chance." Neither Emma nor her mother could speak. For a moment, words weren't necessary. Some debts could not be repaid with money, only with gratitude. Years later, visitors entering the learning center would still stop to read the words engraved beneath the foundation's name. Great truths are often hidden behind small details. Children would ask what the message meant. Parents would tell the story. Teachers would tell the story. And every time they did, people remembered the same lesson. You do not need power to make a difference. You do not need wealth to change lives. And sometimes, the person who sees the truth first is the one everyone else forgot to notice.